Well, welcome to the third hour, I think this is, of our, maybe it's our fourth hour of our 24 hours of project-based learning. And my name is Nick Salmon. Dr. Frank Locker and Gabrielle Diago and I are the founders of the Alliance for Project-Based Learning Plus. Have figured out a way to put this together. And before we step into the sharing that we're about to have from Eswatini and Australia generally, but actually also Argentina, Zimbabwe, and the DNC. This is, I would say DRC is going to be a fun conversation. So we're asking everyone to always be open to the kind of wonder of what our learners are going to be sharing with us and those that are representing learners. People's microphones are muted unless you're one of the people that are sharing. And we are recording this, and we hope to be able to rebroadcast these through our PBL Plus website. So if you don't want people to see you, then you can conceal your image. We do have a feedback site there that's at the bottom of the page, and we will encourage people to put information in there. We're also using the chat bar constantly and monitoring what's happening. And so we'll let you pass questions along through that setting. So I think what I'm going to do is introduce both, and then I think we'll come back to Elizabeth and her students, and then we'll get David and Chris afterwards. So Elizabeth works at Waterford, and I'm not going to get the pronunciation right, but I'm just going to refer to it as the Waterford UWC in Eswatini. And she has a collection of students who have been doing some really amazing projects, and we'll learn about them in a moment. And then David and Chris work at Macquarie College in Newcastle, New South Wales, and they're going to share with us a little bit about their MCX lab that they've been developing. And so on the one hand, it is midday, I think, in South Africa, and it's quite late at night, as is illustrated by the background behind David there. And I feel like there's something else I'm supposed to be telling you. We hope that you're tweeting out images and ideas and things that are coming out of this conversation. And I'm just going to turn it over to Elizabeth and let her share more about the vision of UWC, and then we'll learn more about the projects, and then we'll come back to Macquarie. And I'm going to stop sharing so that allows that to happen.
Okay. Hi, so yeah, I'm Elizabeth Cummergen. I am the IB Diploma Coordinator at Waterford Kamshaba, which is the United World College of Southern Africa. We are located in Eswatini, formerly Swaziland, and the school has been around since the early 1960s. So Waterford was founded as a direct response to apartheid in neighboring South Africa. And the idea was to create a place in which interracial education was a possibility. So diversity has been central to who we are really from the beginning of our history, and it continues to be very much central to who we are today. Over time, we've sort of tried to develop a more encompassing idea of what that diversity looks like, and socioeconomic diversity is also incredibly important to us. So as we've shifted away from it strictly being a racial thing with the end of apartheid, we have tried to ensure that all students really globally have access to high quality education regardless of their background. So we currently have students enrolled from throughout the country, the region, across the continent, and also really globally. many of whom are on some form of financial assistance, because our founders didn't want finances to be the thing that allocated spots at the school. And we've really tried to maintain that as we've moved forward. Mm-hmm. Service learning projects are core to who we are in terms of the education that we do. And all of our students, from our little guys who arrive at sort of 11, 12 years old, all the way up to the end of the diploma program, take part in some sort of community service project. So we run approximately 60 projects on a weekly basis. And our little kids are helping out in the school's nursery school program. They do work in our organic food garden. And then as they go up through the school, those projects become a little bit more personal and also a little bit more involved. So we have students who help out with the government hospital, who do vision testing in government primary schools. We have a group of students who do an art program with incarcerated youth. And as much as possible, we want each of our students to really feel a sense of ownership and a passion for the service projects that they are doing. We also try and ensure that those projects are sustainable. So I'm not just a coordinator, but I am also an alum of the school. And the collaboration that we have with the local animal shelter is a project I help with now as a member of staff, but it was also a project I did as a student in sort of the mid-2000s. And we also really encourage our students to take initiative and build their own service projects. So student-led service projects are really a fundamental part of our community service program. So today I have 3 students who are with me, and I'm going to hand over to them in just a second. Martina is from Argentina. Bora is joining us from the Democratic Republic of Congo. And because of a slight change in schedule, Joy is actually joining us from Lesotho. And each of them is involved in a service project that is a student-led initiative and something that we hope will be sustainable even after this group of second-year diploma students have graduated and moved on. So I'm going to start by handing over actually to Martine.
Great. And Martine, you're currently muted, so you should be able to unmute. There you go.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you very much, Nick. So, well, following with what Ms. Cummergen said, my name is Martin. I am one of the heads of one of the projects here on campus, which is called Asaka Kelane. This means we care for one another in Siswati. So this project is a student-led initiative that tries to deal with some issues that we have on campus. This is regarding gender-based violence, homophobia, sexism, and toxic masculinity and consent. The idea that we have is that we can educate the different members from our community. We can create a safe environment for everyone. It's important to highlight that this is not just a student group, but it involves different parts from our community. We have parents participating, we have teachers, staff members, and people from management school, and volunteers from off campus. And this project really wouldn't be possible without them and their contributions. All these people working together really makes us embrace the feeling of community that we have campus, and that is fundamental for us in the way we interact with each other and the way we learn from each other. So now talking strictly of Asinake Gelane we have done. It was born last year from one of the teachers and students who gathered together. And we started with the activities last year. And one of the first things we did was addressing issues regarding gender-based violence. So we had poetry, performances, and different workshops. So we could educate people on campus on the issues we have here and what we can see all over the world. One of the next thing we did, it was called Men's Week. That I know the name might be a bit controversial because the idea here is not put men in a position of power and to celebrate men in a way, but rather the idea is to do reflection on what is the role of a man in the different societies, and what things we are doing right and what things we are doing wrong, and how we can improve that. So we had discussions on healthy masculinity, toxic masculinity, and the different types of behaviors. We have a discussion on the different types of masculinity because it's important to acknowledge there is not just one way of being a man, but there is like many ways of being a good man. We had performances and we participated into the Movember movement, which is that you grow a mustache during the November month, you fundraise money, and you shave it. So that was one of the things we did. And then this year, at the beginning of the year, we made a consent workshop for the IB1 group. So as soon as they got here during orientation week, we prepared a whole morning of a work regarding consent because it's such an important part on the way we relate to each other. So the idea here was to set a common ground saying, okay, guys, this is what consent is about, because we acknowledge that we come from so many different backgrounds and consent might mean something different from where we come from. So the idea here is to create a safe environment for everyone. Everybody can feel safe and comfortable regarding consent. And now we're moving, because of the whole issue of school closing, we can't really work on campus. So we're moving towards social media. We have created an Instagram account. Now we are encouraging students to create a logo for the Instagram account, and we try to find new heads for this project so it can continue during the years. We are planning discussions on the consequences of being isolated and how being isolated might be harmful to some people. Even though we can't really do much for them, it's important to educate people and to be aware of what's going on. And because some people, because they are isolated, they might be in unsafe environments. And the idea is to see how can we help and what can be done.
That sounds great. And well, we'll come back to how you're continuing to do things in a virtual setting, but that is an important point there of not everyone is safe in the isolation that we are experiencing now. So Elizabeth, I don't know who you want to have speak next, but oh, and you're muted, Elizabeth. So and you're still there. You go.
There we go. Bora.
Bora's next. Okay, great. And Bora, you'll have to unmute. And it should be on the bottom of your screen in the left.
Yeah, okay.
There you
Perfect.
go. Excellent. Thank you, Bora.
Okay, so it's working out. So both Joy and I are part of a project called Brave Girl, and what Brave Girl is a student-led initiative for women empowerment in Eswatini. So what we do is we invite 50 girls from different places in Eswatini. In the recent years, it had only been Mbabane, but recently we've tried to expand the scope of where we want the girls to be coming from, and they come on our campus for a week's time, and through workshops that we have, discussions, we also have a job shadowing day where they go out into different and varying workplaces that they have that they had chosen previously, and try to experience with the different kind of jobs that they can have as young women today. So why we think Brave Girl is important is so we can empower young women from a background that some could say is relatively conservative, and empower them and talk about the different issues that they face and how to bring solutions to those different to these so I'm so sorry to how to resolve those issues that they face as young women in Eswatini that some might, as I said before, consider a relatively conservative place. So the reason I chose this project specifically is because not only am I very for and for women empowerment, is also because I went to the camp last year as well as one of the counselors, and it's a learning experience for everyone. Not only are the girls learning from us when they come onto our campus, we're also learning so much from them, because beyond it, it's not just us teaching them something, it's all of us interacting and finding solutions that we all face, because as a young woman, I'm no different from the young girl, from the girls that come onto our campus in view of the issues that we face as well.
Mm-hmm.
So Joy is up next.
Joy's up next, and
Yes.
as she's getting unmuted, I just have a quick question for you.
Yeah. Yes.
How much of that time during Brave Girl Camp is devoted to listening to what's important to them, and how much do you go into it feeling like, oh, well, I know what the issues are and I know how to get them to a level of empowerment? I mean, has that been a challenge to step back and hear what they're bringing to the table?
Exactly. So I think the focus of the camp is to see what the issues is. It's not us coming, that's why I love the project. It's not us telling them that these are the issues that you're facing, but it's more of a discussion about what issues are you facing, right? And where can we help? And not help as individuals, because at some level we're all facing these issues, and encouraging them to bring forward these issues forward, so we can talk about them and effectively discuss how we can then help, because we're not telling them what the issue is, we're encouraging them to tell us what they think the issue is.
Great. And Joy, if you can unmute and share your perspective, that would be great. And I've gone to a still photo just because we're using a lot of bandwidth here, so I'm trying to hold back a little bit. And we already have some questions coming up once Joy is able to join us there. Let me see if, so it should be in the lower left corner, the little mute microphone, and if you click on that, it should let you go.
You probably have to help her, because I think I had the same problem earlier.
Okay. There you go. All right.
Hello. Yeah. Hello. Yes. My name. Thank you. My name is Joy Mupedi. Like Ms. Cummergen said, I'm from Lesotho, and I arrived at the school in 2019. And so the way I was introduced to Brave Girl is actually quite unique, because I first saw it on the Instagram as I was stalking in school before I arrived. And so it really, what captivated me, I'd say, about the project and why I knew I wanted to be involved in it, definitely when I arrived at the school, was their mission statements for exactly this idea of creating a platform where everyone at the camp is encouraged to share their ideas. And so also me being from Southern Africa, all the issues being addressed are very personal, and that's why it really built my love for the project. And so because Brave Girl is through these activities such as the workshops and the activities that are at the core of the camp, I think it encourages very alternative ways of learning and discussing very, 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 very big issues of our societies. And that's why it's so special to me. And I think we can say this for a lot of community service projects, even outside just Brave Girl, whether it's a preschool that we go and teach to the young kids through community service. You're almost you're pushed to create more and interesting ways to to try and teach the young kids. So it could be, let's say, a mini obstacle to help the kids learn ABC, their alphabets. And so I think because community service and service projects on campus are so encouraged, we're continually being pushed to think more creatively about how we want to address issues that matter mostly to us. And so, like Bora was saying, Brave Girl is solely, it's at its core is the camp. And so it's very difficult to try and have a camp virtually. Hence, this pandemic has put quite a halt on how we move forward with this project, especially because internet access, as well as even access to phones for some of the Brave Girl girls is very difficult to access. It's not very viable, and things like Wi-Fi are not necessarily a norm in homes. And so truly finding that communication becomes, and keeping the project going becomes quite a hassle. However, we're trying our best to go about it as best as we can during this time. So this could be trying to keep like the ideas that like about women and women empowerment alive through social media, because truly at this point that's mostly what we can do to just try and keep the ball going and try keep the Brave Girl name alive.
Very good. So we have some questions that are coming up, and I think we'll stick with the four of you for the moment, and then we'll pick up David and Chris here in a little bit. So I suspect that a project like Brave Girl Camp began a while ago, and of course you as students only get a short time of interaction with it, potentially more than 1 year, I guess. But for educators, what kinds of changes have you seen in that camp over the years, in terms of its potential of impacting both your students and the people who are invited onto the campus? So that's a question for Elizabeth, and Elizabeth, you're muted, so you'll have to unmute. We'll just keep you unmuted so that that's easier to. There we go.
All right, sorry about that. Yeah, so Brave Girl is actually, in terms of the longevity of our project, a relatively recent project. So it doesn't have the sort of longevity that some of our other service projects do, but even just in the few years that it has been working, I think that what we've seen is that year on year, the students who are picking it up are keeping the best of what worked in previous years while also bringing something new and innovative to the table. So as one of the girls was saying, that we've diversified the pool of applicants that we're taking in. And that's really nice because it means that we're getting participants who have different lived experiences, and each of them is then able to bring something different to the table. So even in its relatively short lifespan, I think what we're seeing is that the people who are choosing to pick this project up year on year are really keeping the best of what has worked while also bringing a really innovative spirit and trying to drive it forward.
So, and it sounds like that there is, I think at one point you said something like 60 different projects going on. So you have the potential of students taking up something that has been a project from the past, or they can mark out new territory and say, here's an issue. And I don't know, Martine, whether your project was a project of your own passion or whether it had other students have been doing that in the past, but all of those options are possible. Is that right?
Yeah, so there's long established projects and students are able to choose from that list, but students who are passionate about something else are also, I like to think, encouraged to pitch those ideas and try and move them forward.
Good. I think both Joy and Barbara were commenting on the challenges of shifting a project to an online setting, but saying that it's very critical. And in some ways, I think, Martine, you were saying the same thing, that, well, just because we're separated from each other doesn't mean we can't still launch a Instagram campaign or whatever and keep the ideas out in our extended community. And Martine, are you back in Argentina, or are you still in?
No, right now I am, sorry. Right now I am on campus. So okay. I'm here in Eswatini.
Okay, okay. Because of course that's another piece of this is maintaining relationships over many time zones and things like that too. One question for the three students before we learn a little bit about what's happening in Australia. How has your experience at UWC impacted your idea of what you can do in the future? Did you come with one thing in mind and you're still sticking to that, or has something changed for you while you've been together on campus and you have a new vision of what's possible for you? We could start with Bora, because she looks like she's ready to say something.
I think that coming in, I knew that I was going to be learning into a very diverse environment, but I think it's very it's one thing to be saying that this is going to be a different like a diverse environment and saying that as a statement, whereas living it. And I think that beyond just the diversity in things like race and maybe like I've come to figure out that there are so many things that diverse can mean, right? And that like people have a very different opinions, right? And whether or not they consider themselves to be one thing, and you're like, this is the kind of opinion that I have, and then everyone has this opinion. You coming into a setting where that's not really the case, where people either differ radically from you in some of the opinions that they have, or like are quite similar to you. And I think I've undertaken a new meaning of what I think diversity means in the first place. And I think coming out of that experience, I'm very much more open to listening to people who differ radically from me and like taking the time to listen to what they think and not being turned off by someone who like completely disagrees.
Mm-hmm. Good. How about you, Joy? What ideas did you come to school with, and what do you think you're going to do when you're done? And I'm gonna, Joy, oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I think like similar to Bora, I definitely went into, applied to UWC knowing and wanting to experience this vast diversity and learn from other people. And I was expecting tensions within like opposing ideas. Found that when I arrived, I think more so than anything, I think there's like the incredible people you meet, and it's truly every day you get more and more inspired by the people.
I'm sorry, we're having a little bit of audio difficulties there. Martine, how about you? I mean, you traveled across an ocean to come to school, and so what did you come expecting, and where do you think you're going to go?
So before I came here, I realized that I had once I came, I realized how many stereotypes I have and biased, and how my mind and the way I had a view of the world was so small. But then coming here and having all this diversity, as Bora and Joyce mentioned before, it really helped me to the way I look at things, I look at challenges as well. And I feel like I have grown as a person, and I have grown in a way how I can understand different realities, and how I can make sure that I care about the other person, what they think, how they feel, even though we might be completely different. I think I've grown a lot in that way.
Mm-hmm. Good. Elizabeth, another question for you. When you and I spoke a couple weeks ago, did I understand that you were an elected government official at some point in your life?
No, I have worked with elected government officials, but okay. No, that's never been one of my jobs.
Okay, but you did go to UWC, I mean to Waterford, and then you found yourself back there as an educator. Presumably you've traveled enough of the world to have other perspectives. What's happening at all UWCs, because there's numerous ones around the world, that you think should be infused into teaching and learning elsewhere in the world?
So sitting at the core of sort of the UWC mission and mandate is that through deliberate diversity, we can create education that drives forward sustainability and peace. And I think that it is not only a lovely slogan, but it's actually something that is incredibly true, that when you live with people that under other circumstances you would never encounter, and when you learn to get to know someone not for their ideologies or their sort of their viewpoints, but for who they are as people, it means that you're in a much better position to then see them as people. And I think it helps to sort of remove some of the demonization that can happen where all you know about someone else is their talking points. And I think that it's through sort of curating that diversity, and it is curated. We actively seek students from all over the world, and not just diversity of nationality, but diversity of socioeconomics, diversity of faith, diversity of ideology. When you bring those people together and they get to know each other as people, as the person who lives next door to me and eats breakfast with me, and that I hang out with after classes and I play football with, I think that is what's going to help us create an education that is more sustainable. And I think that diversity, if it can be infused into other schools, would do a wonderful job of sort of making us all a little bit more tolerant.
Mm-hmm. Nice, thank you. Let's keep all of you as much as you can online, but Chris and David, if you can unmute, would like to, in the waning hours of your day, hear a little bit about what you've been doing at Macquarie College. It just for understanding the language of convention here, well, just like United World College, college in many parts of the world means secondary school, or in the case of Macquarie College, it's actually a pre-K through year 12 school. In the US, college means university. So I always point that out because it always comes up. But Chris and David, if you can unmute, and you're asking me for help doing that, I guess. And there we go.
Thanks. Can you hear? Hopefully everyone can hear me now.
I can hear you, and hopefully we'll get Chris here in a second.
Okay, great. Well, I'll just talk briefly because I'm hoping Chris will take the bulk of it. So my name is David Chapman. I'm assistant principal of teaching and learning at Macquarie College. As Nick said, it's a K-12 school north of Sydney here in Australia. And it's a faith-based school and a fairly traditional school, about 800 students all up, and very focused on getting good academic results. And we've had a realization, myself and the principal and others are keen, that we need to change the way we do things. This traditional approach of just sticking to rigid academics. There's a very, very tight curriculum in our state in Australia that has to be followed. And so part of my role is to find ways around that. And what we discovered was that there was a little bit of room in the earlier years, in the elementary or primary years, to fit in some programs that we wanted to do. So finding that space in the timetable, if you will, and then doing some research, going around different schools, including looking overseas. We spent some time in California looking at the most innovative schools there, where we had the luck of having Nick come with us. We came up with a plan based on the design lab that you find at Stanford Uni, but then with the pedagogy that you find at Brightworks School in San Francisco. So we really liked some of that. Came back and came up with a program that allowed for some of our younger students in primary school to spend a full day, or the equivalent of a full day, 1 day per week, working with project-based learning, student-led inquiry type learning. So we created a space that previously is the size of a couple of classrooms, designed for essentially exams in the past. And we turned it into a design lab. And then we had to get the right person to work in there. And we were lucky that we had Chris apply for that position. We knew Chris well. He'd been working with us doing a variety of different teaching roles. And he jumped on board with this. He was the right man for the job. And I'm hoping that he's unmuted himself and he's going to jump in here now and tell exactly what he's been doing. We're several months into this. Our school year starts in January or the beginning of February. And so we're about a term in. Obviously, things are disrupted with the pandemic. But to date, from an admin perspective, it's been incredibly successful. So, but I'll turn it over to Chris now and stop talking, and maybe he'll tell more about it and answer any questions if we have them. Chris, are you there?
Hello. I think everybody can hear me. If so, give me a thumbs up, something, so I know that you can hear me.
Yep.
All right. Looks like it's working. I'll start off. I'll just share a couple things with you guys, and then if you have some questions, I'll be happy to share those. Like David said, we started with a room that was being used as it was just basically our testing room. And I think I've got my screen coming up. I don't know if the screen's up for you guys. Is the screen up?
Yep, looks great, Chris.
Yep. So you can see a few of the pictures of our makerspace design lab now. It does look like it's a bit of a crazy mess in here. I didn't plan on taking pictures for public to see. And so what you're seeing here is just some of the projects that were still sitting out from the other day when I snapped these pictures, just ran up real quick to the school, and you can kind of see the evolving room. Basically, this place has become a hot spot at our school. It's a place of creativity. We've got kids coming in and they're just excited. As many as, you might have a few minutes between school, before school, between classes. I might have high schoolers coming in and just coming in to build something, make something, do something, plan something, or just come in and use the whiteboards to study. I had some high schoolers there, working on a project where they were making some prototypes with our 3D printers. Kids have been making things in the laser cutter. In fact, one of the really cool things was I had some girls that wanted to come in and make earrings. They said, hey, we can make earrings. If we make earrings, we can sell them, and then we can raise some money for a cause that they were working with in their classroom. So the inspiring thing for me is that I, A, get to curate the space of it with the kids that are coming in, and B, when kids go from coming in with an idea or not even having an idea, just somebody's invited them in. So like my 4th grade students invited in the 3rd graders, and it was some of their first experiences into this space. And they came in and all of a sudden they're like, oh, I didn't know this was here. Didn't know I could do this. And kids just got excited. They were wanting to do things. And so, I was arriving at school at 7:30. Our day doesn't start until almost 9 o'clock. And there was kids at my classroom door at 7:30 the other day, or this last 2 weeks ago. And yeah, they were waiting to come in and they wanted to know if they could do stuff. And so that part of the space is really exciting. having the opportunity for students to be able to come and be creative is what's making it exciting for me as a person who gets to just work with kids. I guess I could also just share a couple experiences with you. Oh, that's what you meant. As with students and I'm facilitating things and trying to help students do projects or help them come up with something that they're wanting to do. I've got kids coming in and they're going, oh, that's what you meant. And what an example of, oh, what's, you know, that's what you meant is like this girl right here. Let me see if I can pull up a few more pictures for you. So I'll bring up a couple more. I had a young lady who came in and she wanted to make something in the space, and her goal was she wanted to use a drill and she was going to make a background for an art thing she was doing. And here she is, you can actually see her, she's drilling, and there was a bit of tape on there so that she knew exactly how far to drill. We talked about everything down, putting your goggles on, being safe. And then she starts drilling and she's looking at me. She goes, you know, I think I just went all the way through the wood and now I think I'm drilling into the table. This is cool. And so she kept drilling away and she's smiling and she goes, I guess I should stop now. Oh, that's what you meant by stopping when the tape hits the certain spot. And so I think as I've gone into this space, I'm learning lots and lots of stuff. You know, students are coming in, they're tinkering, they're making things, they're doing things. You know, one student came in and said, can I borrow one of your screwdrivers, one of the precision ones? And I said, all right, sure, you can borrow a precision screwdriver. That means it's one that you check out, you get it out of the box. And he was removing some parts on a laptop. He was wanting to find out how the laptop worked. And as he was disassembling it, he got this idea that he could use the screwdriver as a pry bar, and we had spent some time, he and I went through the how we use it, or one of the other people that were helping teach how to use screwdrivers. So some of my students present to other students, and one of the students was there and goes, you know, you aren't supposed to do what you just did. He goes, oh yeah, I was using it as a pry bar. That's what you meant. And so there was just story after story where I'm learning things, they're learning things, and these little moments of, oh, that's what you meant, keep popping up. And I taught some kids how to use a coping saw, and one kid's like, I've never used anything like this in my life. This is cool. And then he proceeded to use it the way he was supposed to. And then another child, a young lady, came over and she goes, can I do something? Can I reset the blade? And next thing I know, she had twisted the blade completely up. And she goes, oh, I guess that's what you weren't supposed to do. Right. Well, I had taught him how to use it, but I didn't tell him how not to use it. Right. Anyhow, I keep learning things. Yeah. Some cool things, I had some girls that wanted to make bears. Their project, they wanted to make some bears to help other people feel good. And so we've made templates and sent a whole bunch of these home so that they can make them at home and pass them on to other people to help their friends be more excited and, you know, just feel good about life. You know, kids in the space were making puppets and sharing puppets. Public service announcements was one of the last things they were doing. Some of the kids were doing with a public service announcement because they knew COVID was coming along and they didn't know how to address it. And this was before we had lots of social distancing going on. We started making puppets and making, well, we were just taking some time to just educate each other. And so the kids were excited about that. Other things, here's an earring. It's one that a kid found the design and wanted to help do a fundraiser through making earrings, and which brought out a whole lot of conversations about things being valuable, not valuable, and the conversations that the students were taking on and having were just really deep, good conversations. Example, you know, is this rubbish? Is there enough money to be made from this? to be a valuable business versus, you know, another student wanted to make pillows. I think I've got an example of that. And these girls were making pillows, but they realized that the time it took to make pillows were quite intense. Then you have to ship them. The value of the pillows were quite small, whereas the value of the earrings was quite high. And so they saw that, oh, I'm just not going to be able to make very much money in my business. And so that was a time where we saw business taking place in the lab. Another little young lady, she came in, she goes, look what I've made. And I was like, oh, when did you make that? She goes, oh, well, yesterday I started it before class. And then I came in after class and you told me I could continue with the sewing project I was working on. And well, I wanted a bag to carry my water bottle around with. And so she found a common problem that was in her life, getting from class to class and forgetting her water bottle. So she made a bag to keep it going. Other projects, a young man wanted to use his microbit. He was making one of the assignments where you wear your microbit, and he was testing how it compared to his watch that was keeping step counter, had a step counter on it. And then he was like,
great.
Oh, forget this model is just not good enough. So his iteration, he went for another iteration. Well, anyhow, yeah. I'm still going here. Would you like for me to keep going, or you got questions?
I think David wanted to add something, and I've got some questions for you.
I realized that, Nick, you usually try to wrap these up with about 10 to, so we've only got 1 or 2 minutes left. I just wanted to add in here that what the biggest success here, in addition to the students having a new way of learning and getting excited about the learning and working with Chris in that space, is that it's setting up our school to transform. We're quite a traditional school, as I mentioned before, and a lot of teachers didn't, even though we've given them training in PBL and this kind of thing, didn't really see the motivation for change. But as we have this cohort coming through from grades 4 and 5, moving up through the school, it's going to really push the envelope to try new things and to new ways of learning. So it's part of an overall strategy by getting that buzz happening with those year levels, and it's working for us, and we're really excited where it's going to go. So yeah, anyway, sorry, Nick, you had some questions perhaps?
Yeah, well, I mean, so in the session with Hector talking about hackathons, we were talking about a hackathon culture instead of a hackathon event, and it feels like in a pretty short period of time, because I know your campus well, that Chris, somehow you've been able to cultivate a maker culture within a maker space, that it's not a standalone event. I only think about do these things when I come into this space, but kids are asking for more time and more connection and taking projects home with them, and all of that seems to be happening. So that's just a general observation, but I wonder, from your perspective, do you see other educators saying, oh, I get how kids can be learning math and science and language, et cetera, and creating evidence of what they know, teaming up with you? Is that happening yet, or are you still fairly isolated?
The honest truth is there is a bit of isolation, but we have some teachers that are saying, hey, I can see how we can make connection here. I want to continue making those connections. And so that's where one class is driving a whole lot of the business aspects that I see within some of the students coming into the place, into the design area. Whereas other teachers are coming along and, one teacher's there and you're like, I would like to see if we can help work on some skills. And the next thing I know, I've got kids singing along and putting buttons on clothes, and they have never sewed anything in their life or even picked up a needle. And so skills all of a sudden are coming together that you would never, well, for our people that are coming to our, the students at our school that have never really done anything hands-on, they're having an opportunity and getting excited. And so while some teachers are definitely on board and really excited to make those connections, others, while they're not as excited are starting to warm and starting to help teach in the design lab. We're looking for more connections outside of the building, and a few teachers have been talking about how we can make those connections through service projects. And so I was just reading some notes yesterday from one of the teachers, and she had some really neat ideas that tie back into the International Baccalaureate projects that these guys have been talking about, you know, service learning and making a difference in their community.
Mm-hmm. So I'm going to ask the UWC team to all unmute while I ask this question, and then we'll wrap up with that. So a question that's come up from several people is how are you able to achieve what you're doing within kind of a high stakes testing environment? So in New South Wales, it's ministry driven, and in Eswatini, it's IB expectations about the kinds of exams that people are taking. So David is unmuted, so I'll let him share that perspective from Australia, and then we'll get somebody unmuted from elsewhere.
Just very quickly, a lot of people make assumptions about what the expectations are. And I've learned from experience to not assume, and I go back to checking, you know, where there's rules or regulations or compliance documents, check what you actually have to do, because a lot of the overriding traditions and assumptions aren't always true. And so from there, I've been able to find the cracks in the curriculum, if you will. And in those cracks, we allow for creativity and carve things out. And that's how this program started.
Great. And Elizabeth or Joy or Bora, do you have a perspective on that from? And then we'll wrap it up here in 2 minutes. Oh, do I have to unmute you again? Let's see if I can do that. There we go. There we go.
Thank you. I guess for my part, just sort of very briefly, like for all that we ultimately have to achieve certain curriculum sort of goals at the end of the 2-year program, and we do the IGCSE program lower in the school, I think that you can find a lot of space within that there is sort of, there's cracks within the fixed curriculum that allow us to do things that are creative and engaging. And I would hope that the students feel that way as well. I think our perspectives might be a little bit different.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's interesting that you and David shared almost the same thing, as don't accept structure as the limits of what you're supposed to be doing, but just a starting point, and then exploit that to support great teaching and learning. Good. Well, thank you all for joining us and overcoming some of the challenges of so many different voices, but I appreciate the perspectives that each of you brought. We're going to, again, take a brief break, and then Frank's going to take over as the facilitator for the next session or two. And I think we're going to have a conversation between Morocco and the US about PBL in a pandemic. So again, I'm going to just share my screen briefly and remind you of the opportunity to share feedback with us, and at this link there. That was session number 4. So that means that we've done 4 of 24 hours here, and we'll continue around the world. And actually we're going to stay in Africa with Morocco, but we'll be back to Australia, I don't know, like 12 hours from now or something like that. I'm confused at this point, but so glad to have you all here, and look forward to learning more about what you're doing in the future. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Nick.
Bye.
I need to unmute Frank. Okay, Frank, you are unmuted. And Brian.
Okay, great. Can everybody hear me?
Yes, and let's see, Brian, and then I'm trying to remember who, William is the other person that we're looking for.
Okay, I have been eager to jump in for the last 5 minutes, and I wanted to say that I thought that your presentation covered so many issues that are important for traditional educators and traditional educational leaders. I thought the photos of the makerspace that seems to keep on going and that kids don't want to leave behind is a case study in how to drop a disruptive space into a school building and have it catch fire first with the students, and then, since they're the customers, it'll ultimately get to the teachers. So, as you know, we are taping this in 1 hour segments, and I am hoping that when we run these through the editor, that we will be able to capture the essential pieces of that space and David's description of it and the rollout. I'm sorry, it wasn't David, it was Chris's description of the rollout, because I think that every educator and every educational leader needs to understand the power of disruption. So thank you.
All right.